Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to week 3 of Keyboard Harmony. Really quickly, I just want to remind you guys, well, first of all, thank you for turning in your practice hours. I just want to remind you that when you turn them in, please include a total at the bottom. That makes it easier for Ben and I to grade, and then we don't have to do math, which I'm awful at. I'm sure Ben is fine, but I totally suck at that. So just remember when you turn those in to add the total in at the bottom. And if you're just joining us or if you're going to watch this later, I guess this doesn't apply if you watch this later, but I am recording this meeting. So if you want to keep your video camera off, if that makes you feel more comfortable, go ahead and do that. So I'm going to jump right in. If anyone who is here in the meeting right now has any questions, stop me at any time. I don't know if Ben will be here today, so it will probably be better if you just unmute and ask questions, because I won't be guaranteed to see the chat. So that would just be my suggestion if you're here in person. Okay, so this week in Piano Marvel, we are doing a ton of chords. That's pretty much all we're doing this week is 1, 4, and 5, 7 chords. The first little bit is practicing chords in a sequence. So we're in A minor, moving from all the chords based off of 1 or off of the tonic, and then moving to D minor, which is based off of the 4 of A minor, then moving to E minor, which is based off of the 5 of A minor, and then back to the 1 in A minor. They go through a whole bunch of keys like this. So to start, I wanted to just kind of walk through my process of how to do this, and to remind you guys that you do not have to do this hands together if you don't feel comfortable with it. But if you choose to do hands separately, you do have to do a recording of each hand so that we make sure you're practicing both hands. Okay, so let me show you how I get through these chords. At some point, just having them memorized is really helpful. And when I mean memorized, I don't mean notes, I mean the shape. That's how I have all of these memorized, is just based off of the shape of my hand, the shape of my hand. But just so you know how this breaks down to make this hopefully a little bit easier, we'll start with a chord. You know what? This would be a lot easier on staff paper. I think I have staff paper somewhere. Okay, we'll just pick one of these. Okay, perfect. So we'll start with their first example that they give of A minor. We'll start with an A minor chord. And just so you know, if you've looked through these or if you haven't yet, there are no key signatures. They don't give you the key signature. They just tell you the quality of chord. So be aware of that. So if we're starting with an A minor chord, we have from the bottom to the middle of this triad, a minor third, and then from the middle to the top, a major third. And this is the case for every root position minor chord. You have a minor third on the bottom and then a major third on top. You put that all together, it makes a minor triad. The next chord in this sequence, so this is our minor 1 chord. The next is going to be a 4 chord. So we keep the same root. This is what I'm watching for. I'm watching for relationships. And then your hand, the top part of your hand moves up a step. The very top moves up half of a step. And the middle moves up a whole step. So this can be helpful if you don't have your key signatures memorized or if you can't think of them right off the top of your head. I'm looking for half steps and whole steps. So in A minor, this 4 chord is going to be a D minor chord. And then if you already feel comfortable playing your major chord progression, so remember we did 1, 4, and 5, 7 in major. The 5-7 from parallel major to minor, that means they have the same tonic. So an A minor and A major, they share the same 5-7 chord. So if you already are familiar with that, that will be helpful. Your bottom note will go down half of a step. Middle note stays the same. And, oh, I did this kind of a wrong way. Okay, scratch this for a second. We need to come back because we're moving from an A minor chord to a 5-7 chord. Okay, so this will make more sense. So bottom note goes down half of a step. Top note will stay the same. Middle note goes up a whole step. So that's kind of a lot. That's hopefully a little helpful to think about this way. But the main thing that I'm watching for is this movement down a half step and this movement up a half step. For some reason, if I can track those, the rest are a little bit easier for me just to be aware of my outside movements. And then the whole pattern. So you could practice all of these without Piano Marvel if you wanted to, just to get comfortable with the pattern. We're going 1, 4, 1, 5, 7, back to a 1 chord. Okay, so that was a lot of writing and a lot of talk about whole steps and half steps. So if you have your keyboard with you, we're going to go to page 210 and we're going to play through this whole page. Watch for these patterns. Hopefully, I want you to be able to see my hands, so hopefully later if you're watching this, you can pause the video, write these down really quickly, and then watch how I play while also following the progression written out. But this is what we'll play. If you have your keyboard, play along with me. I'm going to slow it down a little bit. For the sake of consistency, I'm going to slow all of these down to 90 for today. And here we go. A minor progressions. Play along if you have your keyboard.
1, 2, set, go.
Now D minor. Then E minor. And then A minor. So one thing I'll point out about this that can be really helpful, even though this Piano Marvel says to hold each of these chords for 2 counts, I would be totally okay if you're playing these like even staccato, just so that you can move quickly between shapes. Because if you're trying to hold this for 2 counts, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, you don't have very much time to move. You have to move quickly and play right away. So I'm gonna say, don't do what Piano Marvel says and play staccato. As long as I can hear all the notes, that's what matters. Okay, so any questions so far? Okay, nothing. If you have questions, just stop me. Okay, so moving on to the next page, sort of. It's still the same page, but it's part 2. So notice they've taken away all the written out notes for you and they have just given the chords. So what you need to know is what key you're in. So we're in B minor. If you know your key signatures, you can use that to get through this. But B minor has 2 sharps, has F sharp and C sharp. So if you're planning on playing an F sharp and C sharp every time your fingers are over those notes, that will be helpful. The only other thing you need to remember is that when you go from your 1 chord to your 5-7 chord, the bottom note will go down half of a step. So A sharp is not in the key of B minor. It's that raised leading tone that we talked about last week. So that's the thing that's a little bit weird that you need to watch out for. So what I want to do is not do this with the recording for a second. The shape is a little bit weird. So what I want to do is I will play these chords and I'll hold them out for a while. So if you have your keyboard, you can try to match the shape that my hand is making and also the sound. That's another way you can check. It's helpful to check the sound, but the thing to be careful of when you're doing that is you don't always have time to just play based off of what you hear. So use your ear to tell you if you're right, but use your other senses like the feel of your hand and what you understand about key signatures before you start playing, so you're not just relying on your ear. Okay, so here's a B minor chord. Go ahead and play and match this up with mine. I'll play it one more time. Okay, next I'm going to change to the 4 chord of B minor. So this is just an E minor chord in inversion. Go back to B minor. Now when we go down to 5-7, make sure you move down a half step on your lowest note. And then back to B minor. So through all of these chords based off of, I play through all of these based off of what I know about key signatures and how I know my hand is supposed to be shaped. Some of these have weirder shapes than others. I think anything that has a B in it, so B or B flat, those are awkward to play. And anything that has a sharp or a flat in the name of the chord. So in this example that we're doing, we have F sharp minor. That's a little bit of an awkward shape. So watch for those, and I would say practice those harder keys first. And I think Piano Marvel is so good for practicing with, but with chords, I would say take some time playing through them in a different way first. And here's what I would do. So let's keep the same example of B minor, and I'm going to get rid of my screen for a second so you can watch what I do. But I'm just going to alternate back and forth between B minor and E minor, so between the 1 and the 4 chord, so I can get used to the shape. So here's my 1 chord. Notice how, one thing I'll point out before I continue, my hands are nearly touching my fall board. And the reason it's like that is to make sure I can actually reach these black keys with my short thumb and my short 5th finger. So this is, it's kind of a weird shape, but compared to, for example, C minor, clear back here, this is clear forward. So just be aware that where you're placed in the depth of the keys can have a huge effect on if you're able to play these comfortably without like any weird like fingers curled under. Okay, so anyway, sorry, I got sidetracked. Back and forth between 1 chord and 4 chord. So B minor, and then E minor. And I'm just going to go back and forth a few times to get comfortable with this motion. And then I'll slowly get faster. I mean, you don't have to do these quickly, but if you're able to do them quickly, that's telling you that you know how to move. Okay, so now we'll do the same thing, but moving between 1 and 5-7 to get used to the other shapes. This will probably take a few times to get used to, especially on harder keys, but it's worth the time. And then I would put it all together, slowly first. 1, 4, 1, 5-7, 1. And if you're using Piano Marvel, you can adjust the metronome. If you're on your own, you can just do this based off of what sounds slower and what sounds faster. Or you can also flip on a metronome to keep track of your speed. So those are a couple options. Okay, so let's take a look back at Piano Marble. So, like I was saying, basically you're just playing a ton of these things, but you're going to start seeing some repeats of certain chords since you're progressing from 1 to a 4 to a 5 position in general. So at some point you're going to see E minor again, and you're going to see F sharp minor again, and B minor again. So being aware of what you're playing and how you got through these can be really helpful. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time playing through all of these, but like I said, anything that has a flat or a sharp in the chord root, those would be good ones to practice first. There are a lot of those. Okay, so now this next exercise is very difficult, okay? So for me, it was very difficult because we're moving through chromatically. We're moving up a half step each chord progression. And there wasn't a lot of time for me to think through what I was doing. And I noticed the certain chords I had more difficulty with. So what I would suggest you do is, if you feel comfortable playing your chords, go through, play this, and keep track of which ones were harder to play. If you're uncomfortable with all of them, then I would just take it one progression at a time, make sure you can play this, and then move on to the next. And again, keep track of which ones are more difficult. The thing that's different this time is, instead of both hands playing the chords, your left hand is playing the roots of the chords. So the root means not necessarily the lowest note, because this is in root position. It's all thirds. So that means A is the lowest note. This is not all thirds. That means that A is no longer the root. So just be aware of that. You're playing the roots in your left hand, but not necessarily in your right hand. But with that being said, this is a little bit easier for the left hand because you can memorize this pattern. Play the note, go up a fourth, down a fourth, up a fifth, down a fourth. And then you do that same thing and just move that up a half step each time. I would say take this slow on your own, and then reach out to me if you're having difficulty with it so we can practice it together. But it is quite a long exercise, so I would say get doing this right away. It goes through every chromatic, every half step from A to A. So that's like 12, right? 12 different minor chord progressions. That's a lot, so watch for that. Okay, next, we're done with chords, sort of. Well, actually, before I keep going, does anyone have questions so far? Okay, so I will continue onto this etude on page 211. This is a piece that you can print off. It has this little PDF button at the top. I would suggest you print it off. This is good practice for analysis because what you are playing this entire time is broken minor chords, minor and major chords. So for example, in this first measure, all I'm doing is playing an A minor chord in each of my hands, descending from the top to the lowest note. In measure 2, same thing. This is your 4 chord that comes from your pattern that you did. And then measure 3, another chord, measure 4, another chord, and this just keeps going. So I have a way for you to try practicing this, but something that is helpful for a lot of people. Might not be for you, but you won't know unless you try. So I would suggest, if you can, print off this example and then actually analyze what you're playing. And I think probably the easiest way to do this is with lead sheet notation. So instead of Roman numerals underneath, you would write the name of the chord above. And let's see, what's the easiest way to do this? Okay, I'll just write this down for you the way I would do it. So if, sorry, this is taking a second to connect. Okay, so if you're playing this A minor chord, sorry, this is kind of abstract, in root position, then I'm just going to write A minor. The next one that we had was a D minor chord, but D was not the lowest note. A was the lowest note. So what I would do is write D minor, because it's a D minor chord, slash A. That means A is the lowest note in this. So this upper notation, this is what we call lead sheet. So if you're ever playing like a popular song or a folk tune or something like that, these chords above, this would be lead sheet notation. Roman numeral would look like this. That's how they would write that. So you can do it either way, but personally I think lead sheet would be easier for this. What I'm going to do now is I will play through this slowly the way that I would practice it. So this is set at 88. I'm going to slow it down to 73. And the way that I would practice this first is not the way it's written, but instead of playing, I would practice blocked chords so I can get used to the shape. And then after that, I would break it up. So I slowed this down to 73, just random choice. I'm going to play through it with the blocked chords. If you have your keyboard, try this with me and see how that works for you.
Set. Go.
2, 3. So what I just did is I played the entire piece only playing the chords blocked instead of broken. And something that I was paying attention to while I was doing this is we're in the key of A minor. If you have your Piano Marvel open in front of you, we know this because there are no sharps or flats in the key signature. And it starts with an A minor chord and it has G sharps, which is the 7th note of the scale raised. So those are our indications that this is in A minor. So A minor does not have any sharps or flats to watch out for except for G sharps. So that makes it a little bit easier. The other thing I was watching is just the shape my hand was making. So all thirds, and then a third on top and a fourth on the bottom, and then all thirds again. So that's basically what I was doing to just kind of keep track of what I was playing, is watching the shape. And there are a couple ways of doing this to make this a little bit easier for myself. What I do is I look at the last note of this triplet. Oh, sorry, it's not a triplet because we're in 6/8. I look at the last note of 3. And I see what it is. I see it's an A, and I look back. This is so weird, but this is seriously what I do. I look backwards and see these are all thirds. So I'm like, okay, cool, that's an A minor chord. Now I look at this. My last note of 3 is A. Looking backwards, I have a fourth and then a third. And for some reason, this just works really well for me compared to this is E, and then I see a third and a third. This is F, I see a third and a fourth. This is D, I see a third and a third. I think the reason I think backwards is because it's easier for some reason. Like if I'm looking at these notes, it's A, G, G. They don't move as much, and that's typically what happens. F, F, E, E. So that's what I'm doing. But maybe that's a little weird and doesn't make sense. But it's what I do. So figure out what works for you and then do that. Okay, I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to play it the way it's written, but I will also actually shout out the chords that I'm playing, which I meant to do last time, but I forgot. So One more time, play along with me if you like, either blocked chords or broken chords, the way it's written. And here we go. Starting with A minor.
Set. Go.
D minor, G major, C major, F major, D minor, E major, A minor again, D minor, G major, C major, D minor, A minor, E major, and then A minor. So talking through this, there are not a lot of chords. The ones you need to know: A minor, D minor, G major, C major, and E major, and F major. There's only one F major chord, I think. But being aware of what chords you play can be helpful, like we talked about last time, and I will talk about for the rest of my life. Looking for patterns will be really, really helpful all the time. Okay, so we have 2 more pages, I think. We'll look at those really quickly. Any questions at this point? Okay, let's keep going. So I don't know how many of you know this. I think it's a spiritual. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho. I sang this in show choir in high school and loved it. So we've got this fun little melody that Piano Marvel has provided for us, and our job is to fill in the harmonies. This is not terribly difficult. You're playing 2 different chords, E minor and what is that? Oh, it's a B7 chord. So we're playing a 1 chord and a 5/7 chord. So if you can get used to these 2 chords in this key, not too bad. So I'm just going to go ahead and play through this. You can play along with me, and if you're here today, ask me questions. I'm slowing it down to 100, just so you know. Okay.
1, 2, set, go.
So like I said, it's just going back and forth between a 1 chord and a 5/7 chord. My left hand is playing E and B. That's all it does. That's its job. And my right hand, I just kept it in the same position we've been practicing. So root position, E minor chord. And this is first inversion, if you're just looking at the right hand, first inversion 5/7 chord. And for those of you that play accompaniment styles, so basically anyone who's accompanying anything on the piano or other instruments, guitar I suppose, although I don't know very much about guitar. Anyway, what I'm getting at is there are a lot of accompaniment styles. This one we would call a 2-hand accompaniment because you are using 2 hands to play it, and then the melody would be provided by a different instrument or a voice or someone else playing the melody on the piano. So this is important to keep track of just because it can be really useful in your professional life, especially music therapy immediately comes to mind because you'll be accompanying these kind of simple but fun melodies. So being aware of different ways instead of just blocked chords, which have their place for sure, but not necessarily what you want to do every day, all day. At least I don't. Okay, next page, same thing in a new key. So we have 1 flat. That tells us we can either be in F major or D minor. Looking at the Roman numerals, because there are no provided written chords, we have a minor 1 chord, which tells us that we're in D minor. So now our new bass is D and A, so you're working with a D minor chord and an A dominant 7th chord. Those are your new chords. So I'll just let you practice that on your own. Last page, improvisation. So up here, this is the thing you want to watch for. Your left hand plays blocked chord accompaniment style. So accompaniment style, that's what we were just talking about. Right hand will improvise a melody. And same thing as last time. This goes based off of what you're comfortable with. If you improvise, go nuts. If you don't improvise, go nuts, but stick with a little bit simple rules. And I'll just review those really quickly. We're in the key of C minor. We have 3 flats, so that's either E flat major or C minor. And it tells us to play a C minor chord, so that we're in C minor. Okay, so if we start with a C minor chord, blocked, my right hand is just going to stick with the notes that you find in a C minor chord, just to keep it simple for myself. Another thing you can do, stick with the first 5 notes of a C minor scale if you want to mix it up a little bit. Next, we have an F minor chord /C. That means C is the lowest note. This is your 4 chord. We've been playing tons of times. So now my right hand is going to mimic using those notes, but I would say mix it up. Back to C minor, and then our G7 over B, that's our dominant 7th chord with B as the lowest note, ending on C minor. So for you improvisers, do this the way you want. If it sounds good, we'll take it. For you non-improvisers, stick with the chords. It's a little bit simpler that way, but for everyone, be paying attention to your time signature. If you're in Piano Marvel, this is much easier to do because it will make you want to change because the accompaniment harmonies will change. If you are not doing this, if you're not recording this with Piano Marvel, make it clear that you're in 2/4, and that will come from your right hand. So if you're doing something like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, that's clearly not in 2/4 because we're hearing 3 beats in between each change of the harmonies. So that's just something to be careful of. Okay, that is everything for this week. Tons and tons of chords, a lot of practice for everyone, for every case. Start practicing sooner rather than later and practice often and spaced out. This way of practicing can guarantee more comfort in playing. I know some weeks are hard and you have to do all your practicing in one day, but when it comes to skills like these, they need to be done frequently and spaced out. So 20 minutes a day would be perfect. 30 minutes a day or 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes at night. You know, you don't have to sit down and practice for 3 hours. Hopefully you don't have to do that. Okay, any questions before we end the meeting today?
Yeah, I actually had a question about a couple of the pages have chord progressions that that's kind of new to me, especially for piano, so it's kind of
Kat,
hard.
Are you trying to talk to me? Because it says you're talking, but I can't hear you.
Oh. Okay. Maybe I'll type it in the chat.
Nothing. Okay, if you have a question for me, email me later. And thanks for being here with me, guys. I will... Oh, okay, here comes a question. Okay, well, wait a second. Okay, so while we're getting this question from Kat, just a couple of reminders. You can play these chords hands separately, but if you do that, you need to record each hand playing. If you're using Piano Marvel, slow down the metronome if that's helpful for you. In fact, I would say at least start practicing that way and then speed up as you feel more comfortable. Don't forget to total your practice charts. That's another thing. Email me anytime you have questions. We can set up a Zoom meeting if you want to practice together. That would be a welcome break from my own practicing. I think that's everything I can think of. Okay, so the question is, for the activities that switch between chord progressions quickly, is it okay to record them separately instead of all in one block? That's a really good question. Let me get back to you. I'll talk to the other professors and see what they're doing. I want to keep it consistent between other classes to make sure it's fair for the other sections. My inclination is to say no, because this is good for you, even though it's hard. Yeah, they switch pretty quickly. But I will talk to the other professors and see what they're doing and make sure we're all doing the same thing. So I will, when I post this video, I will include an answer to this question. And then I will also leave comments open on the announcement that includes this video. So if you have other questions similar to this, please ask them there, because I get a lot of the same questions, which is totally fine. I'm happy to answer all of them. But it's just a little bit easier if I can answer all the same questions in the same thread. So I'll have an answer for you soon about that. And thank you for being here. I look forward to seeing you guys next week.